Perfect. So now we've just started recording. So I had a message there about someone having an issue with their audio. So our third evening together, you may have seen an update to the Zoom link. We've added 2 more evenings on. So the 24th of June and the 1st of July. These are planned to be me as long as nothing changes in terms of my baby wants to decide it wants to come early or anything. And there is now backup. So if there is anything that goes wrong, they will be covered. So there will be an extra 2. You don't need to do anything at all. The links will all stay the same. I've done all of the pre-work already, so it's all set up. It will definitely be going ahead. The only thing that may change is that it may not be me. That takes you up to the 1st of July, which is just before your 2 sections coming up for your exam. So the 2 windows for the synoptic are the 13th of July and the 20th of July. So you should only really have a week or so without anything on top. So you're absolutely welcome, guys. I'm really glad that you are happy that we've added those on. And hopefully, Gemma, you can now hear me. So hopefully you can now hear what I'm saying, but this is all being recorded. Good. So we've added those extra 2 sessions. They're all ready to go, and it does take you near enough up to that synoptic window, which hopefully you'll all be ready to sit your exams by then, which is great. Okay, so very similar setup to what we've had the last couple of weeks. We're going to mix it up a little bit next week, actually. We're going to do something slightly different, but I'll talk about that at the end. But for tonight, we're going to sit there, we're going to do our Menti first, and then we are going to go through our spreadsheet. So if you want to grab your phones, and I will answer that question in one moment. And if you want to go to the website, www.menti.com, and pop in the code 456526, and I'll answer this question while people are starting to go through. So Layla's asked, has it been confirmed? Do we attempt the other exams before the synoptic? I'm assuming you mean you've got 2 left. You're going to have to speak to your individual centre. So I've been talking to my First Intuition Chelmsford about this, and I will be talking to our students individually when we are ready to sit our exams. What the AAT have said is if you are booked in for those exams, even if you haven't sat them, you should be able to still sit the synoptic. Now, I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work at every centre, so you may have to, Ramon, it's just at the top of the screen. You might have to just talk to your individual centre to see how they're planning on dealing with that. So hopefully that answers your question. So there is a workaround. AAT are being a bit more flexible, but the official answer is no, you can't. The unofficial answer is there is a workaround if you've popped them in. So just another few seconds then. So www.menti.com and the code 456526. And we'll just give that another 30 seconds and then we will get started. Look at that, 64 people joining in our quiz. That's amazing, brilliant. And 94 online, that's our highest number yet. So that's great, brilliant. Good, I'll just wait for that number just to settle down a little bit. Good, okay, let's get started then. You can join late if you want to. If you haven't got a phone, you haven't logged in, you can follow on the screen. Try not to write your answer up too quickly though in the chat box. Give everyone else a chance to give it a go. Remember, this is multiple choice, so you can always have a guess as you do go through. So let's have a look at our first question. Good, just a little bit of fun. Remember, if you don't know them, hopefully you're going to learn them tonight. That's the whole point of this here. So we've got Sarah works in practice. She's been asked to prepare the accounts for a client that she owns shares in. What threat is this to ethical behaviour? You've got 45 seconds for this question. So you've got self-review, familiarity, self-interest, intimidation, or advocacy. So someone asked me last week for our threats to our ethical behaviours. So I've tried to put one of these questions in for the next couple of weeks. If you're not sure, it's the last 15 seconds, give it a guess. You wouldn't leave it blank in the exam. So give it your best shot and see how you get on with that question. We've had 72 people answering. Click something if you're not sure. 3, 2, 1, time's up. Super, look at that. I love it when the one that I'm looking at shoots straight up and 61 people have got that right. You're absolutely spot on. Well done there, guys. You're absolutely right. That would be a self-interest threat. She's got shares in this client and she's been asked to prepare the accounts. She's not going to want to show a loss because she's going to want to get a dividend back from her shares. So absolutely, it'll be a self-interest threat because she wouldn't be able to actually be completely unbiased in those situations. Good, okay, just seen Laura's question there, didn't change your name or Menti, don't worry. As long as it's nothing offensive, it doesn't really matter. It's all just a bit of fun. Let's have a look at how this looks on our leaderboard. If it will update for me. All just a bit of fun. We've got Emily that was the quickest. She also got it right. So after question 1, she's going to stay at the top of our leaderboard. Let's see if anything changes on question 2. So a yes or no question here. If you hold clients' funds, can these be kept in your own company's bank account? So either true or false. So it's either yes or no. If you're not sure, think about what would make logical sense. And think about whether or not it will be ethical for you to be able to do that. So true or false, 50-50. If you're not sure, take a guess and see how you get on. Brilliant, perfect. 64 people there getting that right. I think some of those people that didn't have just written oops in there.Maybe you just panicked and went for the wrong one again. So you're absolutely right. It is false. If you're an accountant or if you're a solicitor, for example, and you're holding the funds for one of your clients, well, it wouldn't be ethical if you could keep them in your own bank account, because if you went to the shops or you put through an order yourself, you could end up using your client's money for your own personal use. So because of that, there are guidelines around the fact that if you are a company that does hold money for one of your clients, you have to make sure that you keep it separate in a completely separate bank account. Good. Hopefully we're all happy with that. Must be in another bank account. Let's have a look at what that does to the leaderboard. Little update. Lots of people getting it right again. Emily the fastest, and we've got 2 Emilys at the top there. Brilliant. You can fight it out for who ends up at the end of all of our 5 questions. So question number 3. Which of the following is not a valid situation to break confidentiality? So given authorization, there's a professional duty to do so, to tell your friend to invest in some shares, or there's a legal duty to do so. So you've got 13 seconds left on your count. If you're not sure, take a guess. You've got a 25% chance at getting this right. Brilliant, brilliant. 58 people getting that right. So there are 3 situations when you can break confidentiality. The first one is when the person who the information is about gives you permission to. So maybe it's a client and the client says, I actually give you permission to tell somebody else. It could be husband and wife, for example, or it could be a company saying that you can give information to another company. There could be a professional duty to do so. So the AAT might be doing an investigation into your client and then you are able to break confidentiality. Or there could be a legal duty to do so. So your client could be under investigation and the courts tell you that you need to actually give some information on that client. You are allowed to go to court and actually testify against that client or just give information in what you know. It's not okay that if you turn around to your friend and say, oh my God, that company is about to buy Amazon, their shares are going to go through the roof. You've broken your confidentiality and it's not a valid reason to tell your friends to go and invest in some shares and make some money. That wouldn't be okay. You would be breaking your ethical code. Brilliant. Well done to those 58 people. Let's have a look at what it did to our leaderboard. Emily the fastest, and Emily's at the top. Looks like she's going to hold on to her top position with 2 questions to go. Well done. Let's have a look here then. Kat works in practice and suspects money laundering. Who should she report this to? A co-worker, her manager, the AAT, the police, or the money laundering reporting officer? So you've got 16 seconds. So if you're unsure, take a guess, think of your best estimate and see how you get on. Well done, guys. 56 people getting that right. It's the money laundering reporting officer. Now, the key word here that Kat works in practice. Now, because she works in practice, she therefore will definitely have a money laundering reporting officer within her organisation. That person might also be her manager, but the money laundering reporting officer will be really, really trained in how they actually report money laundering. So if you work in practice, you should go automatically to your money laundering reporting officer. If she didn't have a money laundering reporting officer, can anyone write in the chat box who she would report this to? Can anyone remember? Well done, guys. Absolutely, the NCA. What does the NCA stand for? Super, well done. Well done, Devlin. So absolutely, it's the NCA, which stands for the National Crime Agency. Perfect. So if she didn't work in practice, and a lot of us don't, she might not have a money laundering reporting officer, which means there might not be somebody in the organisation that's trained. She could work on her own. She could be a sole trader. And if that was the case, she would go directly to the National Crime Agency. From that step, the steps are the same. So either the money laundering reporting officer or Kat herself will go to the National Crime Agency, and they will complete, you've just read my mind. I was about to say, what will they complete? Lenka's just answered me, it's a SAR. Does anyone know what a SAR stands for? Great, almost, not suspension. Anyone else? Suspicious, close, in the middle of the 2 words. So you fill out a suspicious activity report, perfect. And what you'd write on that is who you think is actually been committing this money laundering, why you think it, and where you can find that information. And what I mean by that is you might want to say, well, on May's bank statement on the 13th of May, there was £50,000 transaction that the client couldn't give me any information about. So when the National Crime Agency turn up at the door, they know exactly where they need to go and look, because otherwise, by the time they've got the files open, all of the information that's relevant will have been destroyed and will have been hidden. Good, perfect, well done, guys. Really good knowledge there. Let's have a look at what it's done to the leaderboard, and then we've got one more question. Becky the fastest, flying up there, but we've still got the 2 Emilys at the top. Good, perfect. I just realised there's someone called Vote Goat. That's a brilliant name. Last one then. So a few of you asked to cover this, and I'm going to cover it in the next couple of weeks. Sustainability is concerned with which of the following? Meeting the needs of the present without compromising the future, triple bottom line accounting, money laundering, ensuring there's enough coal for future generations, or terrorist financing. So quite a few bits of wordy information there. Let's see how we get on. Probably the hardest question of the 5. Amazing, well done, guys. 58 of you getting that right. That's absolutely brilliant. So what sustainability is actually concerned with is making sure there is an economy and making sure there is an environment for our future generations. So the official definition is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the future. Triple bottom line accounting is what we use to present on that. So we'll talk about that. I think next week I've set up a task, or the week after, set up a task about triple bottom line accounting. Money laundering, it definitely isn't, and terrorist financing, it definitely isn't. So you're absolutely right that no one's put those. And actually ensuring there's enough coal for future generations is an example of sustainability. So actually, that's not a bad shout there, people that have put that. They are both related to sustainability. That's why it was a little bit of a nasty question. But overall, the thing that we were looking for was meeting the needs without compromising the future. Brilliant. Well done, guys. Ellen's just written a question that will teach me to read the questions properly instead of trying to be the fastest. Luckily, in the exam, you're not going up against anybody else, so that won't be an issue. But this is a good way of making sure that you do actually use all the time available in an exam to make sure you do correctly and accurately read the question. But it doesn't help when I do put in extra points when you are the fastest. So that doesn't really help the situation. Good. That was our last question then. Let's have a look at how that has affected our leaderboard and who's ended up on the top. Not that it matters at all. What that matters is that you've taken some information away from this. Oh, look at that. Emily and Becky the same, but Emily's held on there and kept the top spot. Brilliant. Well done there, guys. So hopefully you found that useful. Again, I've tried to completely bring in different information. So there's lots of different questions that you can go through. If there are any questions on those, let me know. We have got another Menti quiz over each of the few weeks, but I've just tried to mix them up a little bit, just so we don't obviously do the same thing every single week. Good, let's have a look then at our task. So if anyone did join after lunchtime today, you may not have received the information with the links. So as always, I'm just going to pop this information into the chat box so you can open it. But at the end of the session, you will be able to, I will send out to you the question, the answer, and the pre-work for next week. So all the information will be sent out to you and the recording and a link to all of the past stuff that we have had a look at. So there's all your information in there. This was quite different to what we'd seen before. So in the second part of our sessions, from the beginning, we've focused on spreadsheets. We've focused on spreadsheets overall, but quite a lot of you expressed that you were quite worried about the written information. Now, I have had to kind of pull this together from a few different sources and pretty much write it myself, because actually the people that have studied Synoptic with First Intuition had seen all the questions that I had to be able to do with you. So there is obviously, this is kind of my best estimate as to how many marks this would be worth and what you would get marks for. But hopefully you found it useful having a go. Now, I have mentioned as well to you all a few times that you can write different things and still receive marks. So it's not a one size fits all with these written questions. I know at level 3 Synoptic, it's the first time you've seen a written question. But when you get to level 4, you'll have to be writing in every single one of your exams, and this is humanly marked. So if you write something that the marker feels should get some marks for it, you will be awarded marks in your exam. So let's have a read. We've got Titans Co. as a firm of accountants based in Milltown. They've got a large office with many qualified partners and staff. So you'll always get some information, some background about the company. Sometimes it will be really detailed, sometimes it will be really important, other times it will be background. This time it's just background. So the clients range from small sole traders to larger companies. You are Christian Mallet. This is always important. You're part qualified, working at Titans. If you're part qualified, it means you're still learning. So somebody that potentially is working above you, it could be quite easy for you just to think that they're always doing something correctly. So it just tells you how to pitch your answers. You report to Emmanuel Fisher, who is fully qualified and is a manager within Titans. You've been chatting to your colleague, Andrew Gabbett, who's a qualified accountant at Titan. So he's more qualified than you, he's got more experience. And a few things have come to light. So he's taken 2 days off work and went to a music festival, but told the company that he was sick. He's overstated his mileage claims to a large audit client, and he's justified that by saying they can afford to pay the extra. And he's made a mistake in some work he's done recently, but blamed it on a junior who had been working for him on the assignment. So that could have been you, couldn't it? It could have been you, because you could have been that junior. In these written questions, this is likely to be in part 1 of your exam rather than part 2. So this is going to be in the first half of your exam. You will have to write up either a report or a memo or an email. really what you need to do there is just make sure you pitch it correctly. So if it's an email, it needs to have to and from. If it's a report, you'd have headings, for example, and maybe an introduction and a conclusion. If it's a memo, it's going to be more of a note form. Now, I wouldn't recommend using bullet points in the exam unless you think it is relevant. I would try and write in paragraphs and in full sentences. What I've actually done here is summarise it probably a little bit too less. So obviously that just gives you an explanation there. So Lenka's just asked how many written tasks will there be. It's very difficult for me to actually know that exactly. We normally have, this is an estimate as to what I've seen in the past. There's normally 2 written tasks in part 1. So there's three tasks in part 1. I'm actually going to, on the last day, go through. So there's normally 2 written tasks in part 1, and sometimes you'll get an email that will be written in part 2. So there isn't always something. So I'd say a maximum of 3, and you're probably definitely going to get 2. Nadia's just asked if you're asked to list certain things, such as examples of sustainability, would you bullet point? Again, it would depend on the question. If it was just said state, so state 3 examples, yes, I would use bullet points. But if it was to list and you needed to explain them, I would still write in full paragraphs and have white space in between each of my paragraphs. So again, it depends on what they're asking you to do. If they're asking for examples of sustainability, I think they probably want you to elaborate a little bit more. So you can still do it how you would do it in a bullet point, but it would obviously be marks. Last question, and then I'm going to go through it, and then I'll come back to questions at the end. But Walter's just said, will they mark you down for spelling? There will always be in exams some sort of presentation marks. I can't tell you exactly how many they are. I think if there was just a couple of spelling mistakes, it would be fine. But if it was riddled with them, then you would lose some marks as you go through for professionalism. So do be careful with that. Okay, any other questions I'm going to come back to in a minute. What I'm going to do now is just go through this task. So you can write them in. It may seem like I'm ignoring you, but I will come back when I've gone through this information and answer those questions. So maybe you just want to hold on for a minute till we get to the end of our memo. So the 2 things we need to do on our memo: how each of these situations that Andrew's explained to you is a breach of accountant's ethical code. So I've guessed that would be worth about 6 marks. And then something else that people mentioned in the briefing that we did last week is that they wanted to look at safeguards. So explain 2 safeguards that could be implemented that would help avoid situations like Andrew's. Now, safeguards are quite difficult to cover because they're very, very specific to the situation. So in this situation here, we're going to start off by talking about these 3 items that Andrew has mentioned, and then 2 things that could try and avoid them happening. So it's going to be very specific to the scenario. I've written 4 examples. There's probably about 20 that would get you marks. So again, it's going to come down to whether the marker thinks that you've actually made an accurate answer, an accurate go, and they would actually be safeguards against what's been said. This is where I think you could get marks for. So there is going to be extra things that you may have put in, which is great. And if it is relevant along the same lines, you will still get marks. So I think that there'd be about 6 marks here. I've given you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 options to try and get those 6 marks. So for the first situation, we are talking about him taking 2 days off work to go to a music festival. So Andrew has shown a lack of integrity by taking time off sick. This is dishonest behaviour by him. That should get you 2 marks, but you would need to obviously write those in full sentences. I've written in bullet points. For the second situation, he's overstated his mileage claim and said they can afford to pay the extra. So the expense claim is also a lack of integrity because it's dishonest. Remember, integrity is being open and honest in everything that you do and don't lie about anything. This sort of practice would bring the profession into disrepute. Well, obviously, if people know about it, but if people do find out that accountants are doing that, they're going to think poorly of the accountancy profession, which we know covers professional behaviour So not only is this breach in integrity, it's also a breach of professional behaviour as well. The final one we've got is that he's made a mistake in some work he'd recently done, but blamed it on a junior who was working for him on the assignment. So blaming someone else for bad work is unfair and shows a self-interest threat by Andrew because he's looking after himself. As such, he's breached the principle of objectivity. But he's probably also breached integrity as well because he's lied about it. He's lied about something as well. So you'd get marks there for putting that down as well. So I've just put some information here about what this task is trying to get you to do, because no doubt everyone's looking at their paper thinking, but I've written something different. That might still get you marks. When they come to these humanly marked exams, no one size fits all. Everybody's different, and lots and lots and lots of answers will get you marks in the exam. So this task is designed to get you to be able to apply the fundamental principles to a situation. A thorough understanding of the principles is required so you can identify what principle is being broken down and to why. Marks will be awarded for correctly identifying the principle and the quality of the explanation. So even if you'd put integrity against number 3 rather than objectivity, if you've correctly explained and given a reason why, you will still be able to get 2 marks for that part of the question. I think that answers Martin's question. Is there any other questions on part 1 of that question that we've just looked at there? Perfect, good. Hopefully we're all happy with that then. Good. So for part 2, so let me just go back to Sarah's question before we carry on. For part 1, you put professional behaviour. Yes, Sarah, I'd agree with that, absolutely. He's taken 2 days off work to go to a music festival. If he's at the music festival saying to everyone, I called in sick to work, I'm an accountant, absolutely, it's going to affect the reputation of the company. So as long as you've said professional behaviour and backed up why you thought that, if you said that obviously if people knew that he was actually at a music festival when he was off sick, I absolutely would agree and I'd give you marks for that. So well done, yeah. There's always going to be different answers. The key thing is making sure you don't just put professional behaviour and leave it like that, making sure you explain why. Making sure you can be why. Link has written 3 can be due care. Normally we say competence and due care. So, as careless. I'm not sure that's quite what due care competence means. It's more around making sure that you're up to date with the profession and technical knowledge. So I think you may be pushed to be able to back that one up, but you could have something along the lines in the fact that he made a mistake. Yeah. Absolutely. Sorry, I was just reading that question there from Valerie. Self-interest for part 2. Absolutely, you're right. He has taken some money out, so he's claimed extra expenses. So absolutely, you get marks for that. Well done. Good, great answers there, guys. Well done. And like you can see, now I've just written down one thing that's also come up to me. But remember, in terms of that, you can always make sure you get extra marks as long as you're backing something up. Just reading the question from Sarah, and then we're going to move on. The last one I'm going to look at. In scenario 3, I also questioned whether the mistake was due to due care, lack of professional competence. Did he need more training? Yes, absolutely. And I'm going to go back to Lenka's question there, and I'm going to say that's exactly how you could link it in. Well done. Hadn't even crossed my mind. That's brilliant, actually. Well done, Sarah. So Sarah's saying that actually was the mistake made because of a lack of professional competence and due care, and did he need more training? 100%. That's a great answer. Well done. Absolutely fantastic. That would definitely get you marks there. So Lenka, brilliant. You could have actually backed it up like that. I was kind of thinking, how would that be linked in? And Sarah's just done it. So well done. That's a really, really good answer there. I didn't even think of that myself. So well done. Okay, let's leave those questions for a moment and then we're going to have a look at some safeguards. So, explain 2 safeguards that could be implemented by Titans that would help to avoid the situation. I've come up with 4 answers. I'm sure you guys are going to come up with about 10. And what these are just to give you some ideas as to what would come up in the exam. So, first idea, publish some policies and procedures over expense claims and sickness. So make sure they have got a policy in place that they would be able to follow. Ensure that all the employees are aware of what is and what is not acceptable. Also, you might want to get them to sign something when they sign up and they join the company, so that if they do breach that, you can actually tell them that they are in trouble. So that would be really good that you could put those into place. Number 2, install and publish disciplinary procedures for staff who fail to comply. So make sure you popped into their staff handbook or their contract that if they don't follow the guidelines of the company, then actually they're going to get in trouble, and what that trouble will be. Ensure that all the employees are aware of the consequences, and that's just going to legally protect you that if anything does go wrong in the scenario. Question 3. Establish whistleblowing procedures. We talk about whistleblowing later on in one of our revision sessions, but whistleblowing is essentially that if you think somebody's doing something wrong, so maybe your manager or so, if you report it correctly, you can't legally be in trouble, or you can't be fired. You are protected by the law. So making sure that there are whistleblowing procedures, so staff have clear channels as who to report this to, and ensure the staff feel able to report it when they see things that are being done incorrectly. So making sure there's a culture for you to be able to actually show all that information. Ensure that management stress the importance of ethical behaviour through training and statements to staff. So leading from the top and making sure there is lots of training in place to make sure all the staff know about it. And this will encourage a culture to the firm so they all think that unethical behaviour is unacceptable and they can't get away with it. You only needed 2, only asked for 2. There was only 4 marks here, but I gave 4 answers there. So there were 8 options. Quite a lot often people then say, would you put 3 even if they ask for 2? If I've got time, probably would, just in case one of them doesn't get you a mark. So if they do ask for 2, if you throw 1 in for good measure. So if you do obviously get the marks after 2, that's great. But if one of them doesn't quite hit it, it may be that you could pick it up with a 3rd one. So let's just read the answers and the guidance that I've written down here, and then I'll open it up to some more questions. So this is a very practical answer given to give details of what the accountancy practice could establish, could be in the key word there, to prevent any unethical behaviour. The requirement is to explain. So you should be looking for 2 marks per point, 1 for the safeguard and another one for how it would help prevent the ethical problems. Good. Let's see if there's any questions around them. So Magda, some of them are obvious. I didn't even think about it. You need to revise again. Well, a lot of these won't be in your revision material. And this is the problem when you get to level 4, because they are specific to the scenario. They're more around common sense, around what you would do in those situations. A lot of these things, though, you could use in every answer. So establish policies and procedures. Well, it could be on expense claimed or sickness, or it could be on something else. So you could always have that one up your sleeve to say that actually policies and procedures is a safeguard I could always put in place. Disciplinary procedures, there's going to be something in there that's gone wrong. So you could always have that one up your sleeve, and then you can elaborate on it to make sure that you're actually putting it to the scenario. You could have whistleblowing procedures and culture of the organisation. You could have all 4 of these up your sleeve, and then if this came up in the exam, you could just link it to that scenario to make it really relevant, and then you've answered the question and you haven't had to come up with them all under the cuff. Is there any other questions on this first part? So Helen's just said, would you need to go into more detail, or is the quality of the answer and not quantity? I wouldn't say any more detail on here. I'd just say maybe a little bit longer sentences, for example. So just make sure, or bring something in from the scenario. So you could say there, establish a policy and procedure over expense claims and sickness. And you could give an example of what you mean. I've tried to keep it quite simple, but I think actually you probably would get the marks for this. Becky's asked for part 1, would you recommend talking about the ethical principle and the threat? Doesn't ask you for it, does it? So it says, in these situations, explain how it is a breach of the ethical code and explain 2 safeguards to help avoid the situation. There is no information there about the threat. So if you think it's relevant, you could pop it in there, but you don't have to do it because they haven't actually asked for it in the question. Sarah's asked, would the format you done be acceptable for a memo type? Very, very similar, but what I wouldn't do is I wouldn't put in these 1, 2, 3, 4. I would have them as 3 paragraphs. So yes, that would be the format that I would use, but I wouldn't use numbers. I'd just use paragraphs for it to be written down. If you was writing a memo at work, you wouldn't necessarily use numbers unless it asked you to do that. Sarah said she's used a heading for each situation. That's brilliant. I love a heading. As a marker, I don't mark for AAT, but I do mark for other organisations. As a marker, a heading's just brilliant. Because if I'm looking for you to talk about integrity and you've given me a heading of integrity, I instantly want to give you that mark. So I would always recommend using headings. I think headings are absolutely brilliant for every exam. Was that useful going through that? Good, I'm glad. So I'm glad that was useful, that we found that quite useful going through that case. So you won't see this question anywhere else because I've brought it together from a few different sources, but there are other questions, especially if you're a first intuition student, on your mock exams, on your MyFI or your Rogo, there are a couple of examples, and I didn't want to use the same ones so that you still had those free for when you did get on to doing your exam scenario. Good. If there aren't any other questions on that, then we've just got a small spreadsheet task to do to finish up. So I left it short because I knew we weren't going to have much time. So it's not as long as the other ones that we've looked at. But let's have a little look. So we're doing a variance analysis. So hopefully you enjoyed doing a variance analysis. It's a very, very common requirement in the exam, actually, to be doing a variance analysis. So it's really good that we do have a practice on it. If it comes up, though, it's so nice. It's a really nice one because there's not many extra things that they can throw in. As long as you're comfortable with how to do a flexed budget, I'm hoping that there weren't many issues with this. And I did leave it quite simple because I knew that task 1 was quite different from what you'd actually seen already. So let's have a look at what we've got. So we've got our task as always. And we've got our variance analysis that we need to fill in. So it looks how you would have looked at when you've done it in your costing modules. And we've got to follow the requirements to fill in this variance analysis. And we've got an if statement in there as well that we're going to do right at the end. So let's have a read of our information. So part A, part 1. On the variance analysis tab, you have been asked to produce a flexed budget and variance analysis for our company changed light. Remember, I'm going to read all of the requirements before I start for part 1, and then I'm going to do it, and then I'm going to come back that I've checked everything. So complete the boxes in the shaded areas. Sorry, complete the shaded boxes on the table on the variance analysis tab to flex the fixed budget results. Use formulas or cell referencing to complete these boxes. And it tells you the materials and labour are both entirely variable cost. So let's go ahead and complete those shaded boxes over on our tab. So we've got to go back to our costing knowledge to make sure that we accurately flex this budget. So when I'm doing a flex budget, what units am I flexing to in this question? Actual or budget? Perfect, actual and 9,650. Both answers absolutely spot on. So well done there, guys. So it does tell me to use cell referencing where appropriate. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to equals that, and I'm going to link it to my actual budget, because then I don't have to type it in. And I've shown that I know how to do that with a spreadsheet. If you haven't done that, don't panic. I don't think you'll lose many marks for it, but it's just good practice when it has told you to use cell referencing to where possible, make sure that you do. But don't panic too much if you haven't. Just try and start getting into the habit of actually doing it. What we've then got to do is to fill in all of these other elements for our information. So we've got sales revenue, we've got lots and lots of costs, and we need to go down and we need to flex them from our fixed budget to our actual budget. Now, can anyone tell me how I do that for my sales revenue? What have you popped into there? Have you popped a formula in? What formula have you put into that cell? Brilliant, perfect. And I can even see a couple of people there have popped in absolute cell referencing as well, which is amazing. Well done, guys. Absolutely spot on. So looks like lots of people were comfortable with this. So what we're doing is we're saying £470,000 of sales revenue relates to 10,000 for our budget. We need to reuse how much we expected to sell each of these units for and redo it for 9,650. So we're going to say equals 470,000 divided by my 10,000, which gives me how much sales revenue that I am making for each of my units, and I'm going to multiply it by my 9,650. Now I'm just going to pop a bracket around here. You don't necessarily have to, but I just think under maths, that's what you would do. You would have a bracket around that first calculation. That is going to give me 453,550. But we looked at absolute cell referencing last week, and we said that absolute cell referencing allows us to drag something down but not move the figures. Now, if I just click into my cell, it's showing me the three figures that have been highlighted. This 470, I want it to move down, so I don't want to absolute that. But that 10,000 and that 9,650, I don't want to move. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop absolute cell referencing around both of those so that I can drag it down and not have to re-input that formula on every single line. Now, some people did mention last week using the F4 key. It doesn't work on my keyboard, so I'm going to do it manually. But if you do want to look at some shortcuts, you don't have to for the exam, so I'm not actually going to focus on telling you them. You can Google them if you want to, but F4 would automatically do it for you, or you can put a $sign in front of the letter and a $sign in front of the number. Perfect. Now I'm going to drag this down. Am I going to drag it to the bottom here? No, perfect. Why am I not going to drag that down to the bottom, guys? Perfect, spot on, absolutely amazing. I'm not going to do it because at the bottom I've got my fixed overheads, and my fixed overheads need to stay the same. That's brilliant, seeing how many people are picking up on that. Really great there. So I'm going to drag it down, I'm going to copy it down, but I'm only going to copy it down to the bottom of my variable costs. So it told me that materials and labour were all variable, so I can copy it down to the bottom of those. But for my fixed overheads, I've got to make sure that I don't assume they're going to change, so I can link them to my fixed overheads. Now, I've got to say that is probably the biggest issue that people don't do when it comes to doing a flex budget. They don't leave the fixed overheads in the same, which you're only going to lose a very small mark for. But it does show the marker that you haven't necessarily thought about all of these different costs. And you're always going to have a fixed cost in there, guys. I don't think I've ever seen a question in the exam for MMAC or costing where it hasn't had a fixed overhead in there. So do look out for that. Perfect. Just a quick question before we look over. How did I drag it down without filling in D7? Oh, I just copied. So I just went, I did Control C on my keyboard, but I just copied it and then I just highlighted those cells there and then I pressed paste. So I didn't drag it down, I just copied it down rather than dragging it. Hopefully that answers your question, Sarah. Oh, perfect. Good. Well, that's the whole idea of these sessions. Good. So we have done all of this. We've completed all of the shaded boxes. We've used formulas or cell referencing to complete them, and we know that we've dealt with this. It's given you a hint as well. So part 2, in row 14, use a formula to calculate the profit for the fixed, flex and actual budget. So hopefully this was okay for you all. So in row 14, I need to show the profit for each of these. How do I calculate profit? Perfect. Sales less all of my costs. So revenue less my costs. Perfect. So I'm just going to pop a formula in here. Brilliant. Joanna's gone that one step further and shown me how to do it as a formula. That's correct. Well done. I'm just going to do equals my revenue less the sum of all of my costs. If you have minus each of these individually, that's also fine. You'll get your marks. This is just a little bit quicker, and it saves you having to do that. Saves you having to click on each one. And obviously, if you are going to find this exam quite time pressured, it does show you how to actually go through that. So I've just done equals C6, which is my revenue, minus the sum of C8 through to C13, which gives me £43,100 for my flex budget. I can just drag that across then to my flex and my actual, and I've got 40,685 for my budget, and I've got 33,532 for my actuals. So I've calculated the budget for each of those things that it said for me to do. So I can highlight that yellow. Perfect. So what's our next one that we've got? In column E, calculate the variance for sales revenue and costs for materials, labour and overheads. Show all favourable variances as positive numbers and adverse variances as a negative figure. Now, this is probably the second thing that people struggle with the most. They get their variances round the wrong way. So we're going to have a look at that now. So they get their variances round the wrong way. Now, what I would do before I get started is I would do myself a sense check. Now, this is talking about sales. So I expected to have sales of £453,500. Now, think of sales as positive money into your bank account. So if you expected to have 453,550, but you only got 448,295, would you be happy or would you be sad? I'd be sad. Yeah, absolutely. Well done. So I'm not even going as far as thinking about my accounts. I'm just saying, right, if I wanted 453,000 to come in and 448,000 only came in, I'm not going to be very happy about that. So that means I need to have in here an adverse variance. Now, the way to do that is just to do my calculation to show as a negative. To get my calculation to show as a negative, I need to say, right, well, I expected my 448. I only got 453, which means it's a negative, 5,255. That's it. That's as complicated as it needs to be. It shows as a negative figure. So it shows that we have got in £5,255 less than we expected to. You don't need an if formula. You don't need anything more complicated than that. All you need to do is you need to get it round the right way. I'll answer one question and then I'm going to get to the end before we go back through. So Layla's asked, does it matter if I start from the actual or flex? Yes, absolutely it does. You need to say to yourself, well, what way round should it be? If you're going to be sad, you need to do your calculations that shows as a negative. Perfect. Right, now we're looking at costs. So now you've got to flip it round the other way. So now I'm thinking about my own individual bank account again, but instead of money coming in, it's money going out. So in this situation, I expected to spend £118,695, but I've actually spent £119,895. Am I happy or am I sad? Absolutely. Bad times. I'm sad. Perfect. So I've spent more than I expected. So again, in this variance column, it needs to be a negative. So I need to pop a formula in there that makes that a negative figure. Now, the way to do that is obviously to minus the largest one from the smallest. So this time I'm going to go the other way round. So I'm going to now say my budget less my actual, and I've got my negative in there. Now, these will always be the same way for sales or cost. So when you are doing sales, you want to take actual less budget. And when you are doing costs, you want to take budget less actual. And that will always be the same way. So all of these figures down here are costs. So now I can just drag that down and it's now filled in all of my variances for each of my costs. Now, it's so easy to get bogged down with thinking, right, accounting, how does it affect profit? But for this, just think, if it's sales, would you want more or less money? If it's costs, would you want to spend more or less? And that will help you to get to that right figure. Now, I'm just going to sense check one more just to make sure that I have got that round the right way. Now, you can learn this off by heart, but I think for me, it's better that you guys understand to be able to check it. So that means whatever way they throw it at you in your exam, you can definitely make sure you answer all those questions. So for this example, we expected to spend 101,904. We've actually only spent 100,786. So I'll be happy because I've spent less than I expected. So it should be a favourable, and look, it's a positive number. So I'm happy. I'm happy with that situation. And more to the point, I'm happy with my formulas. Obviously in the exam, you don't need to write this. I'm just popping that there for you guys, just to make sure that you have got that understanding. Is there any questions on that part? Super, guys. Brilliant. Well done. Okay, few little bits left then for us to have a look at. So let's just check we've done all of this. In column E, calculate the variance for sales revenue and all of our costs. We've done that. Show all our favourable variance as positive and adverse as negative. Spot on. Happy there. In cell F14, use the sum function to add up your variances. So let's have a quick look there. So in F14, we are going to use the sum function to sum these up. You can use auto sum, or you can just type in equals sum. As we go down, we can press enter. Martin, you're right. Give me some credit, guys. I'm spending 4 hours a week writing these spreadsheets for you guys. I'm going to make a couple of mistakes. You're absolutely right, though. It is a weird title. I should just say actuals. So there you go. Overall, then, we've got a negative 7,153. So add up our variances, and that is the total. I can just sense check that just by highlighting them all. £7,153 there. There was just one other question that came in. Can we relate this to over and under absorption? Kind of. Yeah, I suppose you could say, how much cost have you recognised? Should you have recognised more? Would you be happy or sad? And that would be over or under absorption. It is a different topic, but I suppose it is along the same sort of lines there with those questions. Good, nice little requirement there. Adding up the variances then. So in F14, use the sum function to add up your variances. I'm happy that I've done that one. Perfect. Format all currency figures to show to the nearest pound. So as we highlight anything that's currency, so it's anything below these lines, I'm going to make sure that I change to currency and no decimal places there. So hopefully we should be happy with that because we've done that one a few times. And now we've got our conditional formatting, and then we've got an if statement to go, so 2 things left. So a couple of people wrote on our list that they wanted to look at conditional formatting. So I have popped it in a couple of times because there is lots of different ways that you can use it. But what we've got to do now is we've got to show the font as favourable in green and an adverse variance in red. And we've got to do this for all of the variances, including the total. Now, there's lots and lots and lots of different ways that you can do this. I'm going to show you one way. If you've used a different way that does work, don't worry about changing it. That's absolutely fine. So there's lots of different ways that you can do it. I tend to use this same way every time because it does tend to work in most scenarios. So if I highlight all of my variances, conditional formatting is on the home tab, so the home ribbon, conditional formatting, and I'm going to go to new rule. Now there is lots of ways you can do it using all of these, and if you are familiar with it, feel free to use them. But I try and do it exactly the same as I go through every single time. So new rule, I then go to the second box, so format only cells that contain. This tends to work 95% of the time. So I normally click on that and then I will write a rule using this information. So based on the sales value, anything that is greater than 0 will be a positive, a favourable variance. And therefore, we're going to select this format box and we're going to make the font green. So anything that's greater than 0 will be a favourable variance, and therefore we need to make it green. There's lots of different things that you can do to change it. The most common 2 that they ask you is to change the font or to fill in the cell. So if they said make the whole cell green, you would go to fill and you'd select green in here. But they've asked you to change the font. So under colour, I'm going to select this bottom drop down box, and it doesn't tell me which green to use. So I'm just going to use that one, and I'm happy with that. There is lots of different ways to do it. If you've done it differently, don't worry. As long as it's done the correct requirements, that's fine. What you can't do is go through and just make them green by using the font box, because they will check and you won't get the marks. You have to have done some sort of conditional formatting to get these figures. So as I press OK, all of my positive ones should turn to green. So I'm comfortable with that. I now need to write a second conditional format to get my red boxes in there. So conditional formatting, again, I'm going to go to new rule. I'm going to use the same box because it normally works for me. So format only cells that contain. I'm now going to change it to less than 0. And I'm going to pop in there, changing the colour to red. Doesn't tell me what red that I need to use. So I'm just going to use the first one that I see. And as I press OK and OK again, it should change those boxes to be a negative figure. Are there any questions on that? So Delvin, I just said, no, you can't. So you can't just change the boxes using these up here. They will check and you will lose marks for it. What they will do is they will go on to conditional formatting and they will say manage rules, and they will check that you've got some rules in there. The rules can look different because there is different ways to get it to work. But if you've just filled the boxes in, no, you won't get those marks. Martin asked, my currency format looks different with no space between the pound sign. Doesn't matter. As long as it's got a currency and no decimal places, there is lots and lots and lots of different ways that it can look. And as long as it follows those requirements, you'll be absolutely fine. So don't panic about that. There is different ways it can look. Sarah's just said, can I ask what cell styles are? Let's have a little look. Where have you seen that, Sarah? Oh, on the home ribbon. Oh, they're just shortcuts for conditional formatting. I've never used them before, but it will just mean that if something's good, bad, or normal, you can use them. So they're just another way of formatting cells. They're not actually in your syllabus. I've never used them in real life. But it's just if you're doing a really big spreadsheet, you can set those up to make some things green, etc. Last question, then we're going to go through. Magdalene has asked, I'm colourblind and this is my issue. Will I have less points if I choose the wrong colour? That's a really good question. I don't actually know the answer, actually. The only thing that I would say is I'm going to do that now, actually. If I go back to the new rule, if I go to format only cells and you go to like greater than, as I go into here and I go to font, if I highlight over them, it does tell you the colour. So it does tell you what colour that you would use. So that I would say just hover over that and give that. But that is a really good question, actually. I'm not actually sure how that works with the AAT. I might actually try and find out some information on that. But for that specific issue, you would be able to hover over it and it would give you the colour there. If you can just see where it says green there, it's just shown that box there. Helen's just said, for some reason, the conditional formatting was already set. I think I forgot to take it off before I sent it out to you. But if it was, if you highlight it and just go to conditional formatting and clear rules, you can just clear all the rules and put your own in, if that was the case in the exam, which I don't think it was. Again, I'm sorry, I think I'm just human. I have to do these answers and then I have to go back and then make them questions. They take quite a few hours, actually, to prepare these spreadsheets for you each week. So if that ever does happen, you can clear the rules by going conditional format, clear rules, and then clear all the rules from your entire sheet or your selected cells. Any other questions on that before we have a look at our last bit there? Becky's just said, would you recommend taking a screenshot to show you've managed the rules? No, not unless they ask you to. Not unless they ask you to do that, you don't need to do it at all. There's also another question that's just come in saying you've missed all the previous sessions. All the information, as long as you're registered, will be sent out at the end with all the previous recordings and all of the previous information. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Shelley, I'll just do Shelley's question and then we will do our if statement. Obviously, if people do need to pop off, this is all being recorded. It will all be sent out at the end, but we've just got one more thing to do. So we've just got our if statement and then it will be open up to any questions. So how did I do my sum for my total variance? I just did a full sum. So equals sum, open up my brackets, and I just selected all of my variances and I closed it. The question there, can we use the function if? I don't know why you would need to, because it does say use the sum function, so I would expect you to do that. But I don't know why you would need to use an if statement there, because all you're doing is just summing them up. So don't need to make it any more complicated. Good, so we've done that. Use our conditional formatting. We've got one thing left. So in cell F15, use an if statement to check if the variances have been calculated correctly. So if they are calculated correctly, it should show balance. If they do not, it should say not balance. This should check that the variance in F14 equals the difference between the actual profit and the flex profit. Label this column, check. So the first thing to do with an if statement is to get your head around what it's asking you to do. So it's saying, is the difference between the flex budget and the actual minus 7,153? If it is, it balances. If it isn't, it doesn't. So you need to go back and check some of your workings. What I love about this in an exam is actually it's telling you whether you've got it right. It's saying to you, if it says balance, well done. If it doesn't, something's gone wrong. So you need to go back and check it. Maybe you've done your variances round the wrong way. Maybe you haven't summed something up correctly, but it's saying something's wrong. Go back and check it because you're going to lose out on some marks. So it's almost giving you that option. So we've done if statements before. So remember, when we do equals if and we open up our bracket, it gives us some hints. So it says, what is the logical test? what do we want it to do if that's true? And what do we want to do if it's false? So well done, guys, for writing that in. So we're just going to go through that step by step for anyone that hasn't seen any of our other sessions. So if, opening the bracket, the logical test is if the difference between the flex budget and the actual is equal to 7,153, then I want you to do something else. So if I say equals the actual less my flex budget, and I know that's true because it's got to be a negative figure, so I have to minus the larger figure from the smaller, is equal to 7,153. When I press my comma, it says, what do I want you to do if it's true? Well, I want you to write the word balance. Remember, because it's a word, we need quotation marks around it. So open up my quotation and I can write balance, close off my quotation, comma, open up my quotation marks again, because if it's false, so it doesn't work, I want it to write not balance and close off my brackets. Now, when I press enter, it says balance. So I'm really happy there that that happened. If I'd got these round the wrong way, so if I'd said D minus E, it says not balance. And it's telling you something's wrong. It's telling you go back and check. And when you go back and check, you would find that actually 40 minus 53 is a positive 7, and you want it to be a negative 7. So it's telling you to go back and check it. Don't think that it's your if statement that's automatically wrong. It could just be that you popped in the wrong logical test, and actually the rest of it's working fine. Last thing it told us to do then was just to label this column check. So just to pop into there, I check, and I've got there my balance. And I can now highlight and just check that I've done everything else. So if they're correct, it should show balance. If not, state not balance. I'm happy with all of that, and I've labeled my column check. And we've now completed all of requirements in that variance analysis. Now, I know that was slightly shorter because obviously we went through. Yep, you're absolutely right, it is a row. Yeah, so label the column check, but yeah, absolutely, that is a row. I would say label the row, so well done, guys. So I know that's slightly shorter from what we've looked at on the others, but hopefully that was quite useful to you all to go through it. Apart from the fact that people are realising that I've made a little typo error there, are there any questions on anything that we have covered? Let's do the spreadsheet and task 1 first. If you need to drop off of the call, that's absolutely fine. But are there any questions on any of the spreadsheet information or the tasks? So Layla's just asked, could we have a question on over and under absorption through Excel, please? Now, I don't personally think that that sets itself up for Excel very well. So I'm going to actually, unfortunately, say no, because I don't think that it would be tested through Excel. I think if that was to come up, it would be more likely to come up in the first half of the exam. So I would say you're better off going back and revising your costing information and potentially going onto the AAT website. What I've done for you guys, actually I'm going to send out in the email in the moment, is I've actually done some screenshots as to where to find all of the practice information on the AAT website. So that's uploaded to my email. So I don't think that it would come up in the spreadsheet section. So I would focus on, I just can't see how it would come up in Excel. Same with process costing. Someone else asked for process costing last week. I don't think that they can really ask you with Excel, but it could come up in part 1. So don't neglect it. But I can't see how they would answer it in spreadsheets unless they got really, really creative. So just keep going through your old notes. Lenka, ABC or batch costing? I think batch costing is very unlikely, but ABC potentially could come up. But the only way it would come up, it was just that you would type in to the boxes. So again, I did look at doing that yesterday for a task for you at the end, And I just decided that it was best that you could just do it on your own. Now, what I would say, and I have said this to a couple of students that have emailed me, if you are thinking, well, I need some more practice, if you go back and actually look at all of your materials that you've done for your other modules, so your costing and your, I can just see there's lots of questions coming in. I will go through them all, I promise, if you just bear with me for 1 minute. So if you go through all of your old material and go through your old questions, instead of answering it on a piece of paper, open up a spreadsheet and open it up on a spreadsheet. That will get you practicing doing all of these questions in the format. So I'm trying to do the ones where I can bring in quite a lot of formulas for you guys to practice, but you can do any of those questions. If you want to do ABC, process costing, or any of those things, over and under absorption, open up a blank spreadsheet and then just give you that information and just answer it on a spreadsheet. It gives you lots and lots of practice. And that's what I always say for my students for homework. If they've run out of stuff to do, that's a really good one for them to go through. Hopefully that answers that question. Let's see what else I've just missed out on the questions. Just bear with me for 1 minute, just making sure. Answered all of those. Thank you for the nice compliments. Thank you very much. Ellen, just bear with me a minute. And of course you can ask something. Let me just answer the questions relevant to this spreadsheet. And then of course I will answer that question about your goal seek. Thank you guys. Can I elaborate more on the SAR that I mentioned in part 1? So a SAR is a suspicious activity report. So if I was working in practice and I thought that someone was committing money laundering, I would go to my money laundering reporting officer and they would be responsible for completing a SAR. If I was working in industry and I didn't have a money laundering reporting officer, I would go directly to the National Crime Agency myself and fill out a suspicious activity report. On the suspicious activity report, I need to write who I think is committing money laundering. I need to say why I think they're committing money laundering. And I need to say where in the accounts that information would be. So let's just say, for example, I thought Jonathan that worked for Elite Fabrications was committing money laundering. So I would fill out this suspicious activity report and I'd say, Jonathan from Elite Fabrications, I just made up that company, I can't remember what I called it, Elite Fabrications, I would say, I think he's committing money laundering because I've asked him about some suspicious inputs into his bank account and he can't give me any reasons. If you want to make sure that this works, if you go to May's bank statement, you can see that on the 13th of May, £50,000, a round figure, was inputted. When I asked him for some backup and an invoice, he didn't have one. So that's the information that you would send over to the money laundering reporting officer within your SAR. I have actually got a question coming up in one of the mentees in the next couple of weeks on a SAR. So look back through your notes or you can Google it. I do get worried about people Googling because sometimes the AAT syllabus isn't quite as complicated as it is in real life. So do get a little bit concerned about doing that, but do go back through your notes and it should be in there something about your suspicious activity report. Let's just check. Sarah said, will there be a percentage figure to use to flex the budget in the exam? Not always, you might have to calculate it. So it might say to you that only 8,000 out of 10,000 was actually produced. You might need to calculate the percentage. So it'll be completely different when it goes through. So it depends on the question. So Jennifer has said, will an if statement always give a balance answer? Only if I write balance in there. So if you look in here, I've written balance into that if statement. If I'd written monkey in there, that would write monkey. So it depends on what you put into it. So on the if statement, it will say whatever you write in there if it's true, or it will write whatever you say in there if it's not true. So it depends on what you've popped into the boxes there. Layla's asked, how do you get to write over the spreadsheet? I'm not sure what you mean. Are you talking about password protection? If you could just, Layla, if you could just elaborate on that question a little bit at the bottom, that would be great. Can I explain how to password protect alternate columns? Funny enough, I had a question at the beginning about a spreadsheet that was locked and unlocked. And I have said that I will pull something together for next week as an example. So I will make sure that I add that in. So can I password protect columns? Just writing that down. Perfect. So I've added that on. So I'm actually going to do an example as to how to do that next week, because it's not a very simple thing. So it's a bit difficult for me to just explain it really quickly. So I'm going to do an example. Let's see if I've missed any other questions. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody. Jennifer, yes, it will always give a true answer if it's true. So on my logical step here, I've said E18 minus D18 equals F18. If that's true, then it will write whatever's in that box. If it isn't true, then it's going to write whatever's in this second box back here. So it will depend on obviously what you've written in there. With the quizzes at the start, do you create them or they're on the website? No, I create them. You guys are getting a hell of a lot of time out of me every single week. I reckon about 4 or 5 hours are going into this 1 hour of our protection. I'm writing them. I'm going through and taking the information from our notes and popping them into a Menti quiz for you. So they're not anywhere, I'm afraid. They are written from my head. Password protect the cells. Yes, so I've just mentioned that. I am going to go through that. I don't know if that message was up there before I mentioned it. See you next week. Becky's asked, do you know where we can find similar quizzes? No, I don't actually. No, I don't know for this syllabus. I know one for numbers for ACCA, but I don't know one for this. Just go through. Sarah's just asked, could I add IRR formula? No, I'm not going to add IRR formula because you don't even get asked about the IRR formula in costing. You only ever get asked about it in a multiple choice question. So I'm not going to go through IRR in these sessions because I don't think you'll get tested on it at level 3 or doing it at level 4. I think it will be much higher on. So I wouldn't worry about that one too much. The most you're going to get for IRR will be a multiple choice question in part 1. So I don't think that you do need to worry about that one too much. Good. Are there any other questions? Anything? I'll open it up to anything now. So they were all on the spreadsheet. I haven't forgotten about that goal seek. I can't remember who wrote it, but if there was a question on goal seek, if you want to type it now, I'll be happy to answer it. But if not, feel free to drop off. But if there is that question on goal seek, please feel free to pop it into the chat box now. Can you just elaborate what you mean by scenario manager? What would you like specifically to do with it? Because I don't think it's in the syllabus. If you could just drop me an email as to what's in your book, and I'll have a look. I think what they're probably doing is just getting you to compare 2 different things. I'm not sure whether it's necessarily a Excel thing. So if you just drop me an email, if that's okay, Sarah, just maybe a screenshot or the information, I'll just have a think about it. I'm absolutely not saying no. I'm just not sure how it would come up in the exam. So if it's relevant, absolutely, we can have a look at it. So if one of you ladies, either Sarah or Becky, don't mind dropping me an email just with what's going on, then I'll have a look. Subtotals, they're in there. So Sarah, they're coming up in one of the sessions. I've already prepared one of those. I think it's actually next week, actually. So that's already in there. So just talking about next week. I know a lot of you have dropped off if you're not already on here. That's absolutely fine. Next week's a little bit different. So rather than doing a recap from another module, what I've actually done is I've pulled together all of the Excel questions that came up from the Menti that we looked at last week. And there's going to be a different tab for each of those so that we can practice the Excel. So that is on there. Subtotals is on there. VLOOKUPs and HLOOKUPs are on there. Pivot tables are on there. Charts are on there. Trend lines are on there. So it was everything that people wrote in So it's a bit less of the technical knowledge. So obviously you have looked at the other modules, a bit more focused on just spreadsheets for next week. So it's a little bit different, but I thought we'd just mix it up a little bit to look at each of those bits. So actually, we will probably definitely go over 8 o'clock next week. So just to let you all know, it probably will be a little bit longer. So I want to make sure that we are comfortable. So if there is anything extra that people do want to do, if you let me know, like you have with the unlocking cells, I will make sure I add it on, and we'll have a very Excel focused session rather than the recap. Good. I'm just going to stop our recording then. So I'm just going to stop our recording, but I'm not going anywhere. So if anyone has got any other questions, I'll hang around for a few more minutes. There was still a question on that goal seek. So if that person is still on the line, I'm happy to have a look at it with you now. If not, you can email me if you don't want to go through it in front of everybody. So thanks very much, guys. Another great session, and I'll send out all the information and I'll send out the recording as soon as it comes through. Lovely.